U.S. Attorney Brett Tolman, also the Executive Director of Right on Crime. Brett, good to have you with us today on such an interesting day and time in our country. I want to get your reaction to the Supreme Court's decision now against New York's concealed carry law, as which we heard Logan just say, their first major decision in almost a decade, and a law that had existed since 1913. What is your reaction?
You know, this is an overdue ruling. And I say that because, Bianca, when you have an affirmative right granted to a citizenry, as we do in the Constitution, New York's law was requiring folks to carry an extra burden to show that they're entitled to have that right. That's not what the Constitution grants when it grants us, rights and privileges. It actually applies to every citizen. There were many problems with the New York law, including the fact that New Yorkers were disparately treated by this law as opposed to those in other states that could carry. It is an issue that allows for the states to regulate. They can do, certain limited regulations of time, place, and manner of when you can have a gun, but they cannot infringe on the underlying right, which is what New York did. And I think Clarence Thomas wrote an exceptional opinion in this case. Yeah,
and overdue is how you said it. And I think, too, there's sort of a pattern here of the nation's highest court defending the Second Amendment. I mean, their ruling in 2008, 2010 was allowing anyone to keep a gun at their home. So they have been protective of the Constitution and the rights that people have here.
That's right. And keep in mind that the Second Amendment is very clear that it shall not be infringed. And I think the court, if it's honest about it and you take politics out of it, they're interpreting that provision of the Constitution and they're giving it its full credit. I'm more curious to know that 3 justices did not rule in favor. This should have been a unanimous decision, given that it is an explicit right granted in the Constitution.
Well, we are sort of living in fractured times, right? I mean, obviously, we have this ruling today, Brett, while the Congress is voting on a bipartisan push. Cornyn's getting some pushback on it as well. What do you make of that? We kind of have a fractured nation, as we've seen in so many other major topics here. We are very divided.
Yes, we are divided. I think that, Senator Cornyn and others are well-meaning, and they certainly have the emotional and compassionate side of Uvalde fresh in their minds. But we have to be very careful to legislate when, we are reacting emotionally to difficult situations. And that's what's gotten us in trouble before. And that's what happens when we see, our rights and privileges taken. It's always a result of an emotional response to a particular event. And in this case, this bill is troubling. There is, and some have argued that it's more a spending bill and under the guise of a bad gun bill. There's a lot of issues in there that if you dig into the weeds on this bill, it's troubling. And, that doesn't mention the fact that red flag laws are probably unconstitutional. So we'll see where this goes.
Right. This is just coming in to me, too. It's a statement from President Biden on the Supreme Court ruling on guns. I'm going to read it to you here. Biden saying that he is deeply, and I'm just reading this for the first time here cold, I'm deeply disappointed by the Supreme Court's ruling in New York State's Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. He says, in the wake of the horrific attacks in Buffalo and Uvalde, as well as the daily acts of gun violence that do not make national headlines, we must do more as a society, not less, to protect our fellow Americans. But a lot of people are saying none of these mass shootings we've seen lately would have been stopped with a law. So it does seem like there's a real, question here about this is a constitutional right, and yet we have the Democrats continuing to use very emotionally charged mass shootings to wage in on taking away different, rights possibly, and using that to sort of sway people emotionally, Brett.
President Biden's statement is outrageous, and it flips on its head the real sentiment that should be conveyed, and that is an enthusiastic embracing of the Supreme Court's decision to allow citizens to protect themselves. That's how you answer, these issues, as opposed to let's disarm law-abiding citizens. it's not the law-abiding citizens that we're worried about, and we should allow them to have that protection because it was, a brilliant forethought by our, the framers of the Constitution that we would be able to protect ourselves, and each individual could protect themselves. And so the president's statement is in particularly outrageous, given, the Uvalde shooting.
Well, we just heard Logan Raddick saying that Kathy Hochul also reacting today, Brett, saying she will do everything she can. Does she have any way to do anything, or is that just rhetoric as she's facing re-election? I mean, what could Hochul actually do now this has come down from the Supreme Court?
She would have to, garner support among legislators to pass a law that is, not like the New York law. So another attempt at trying to restrict, carry from law-abiding citizens. And that happens. And, if she wants to pursue that, good luck. I think the Supreme Court will, rule on that and overturn whatever efforts she may take if it infringes on the Second Amendment right.
Okay, so obviously today's going to be a very busy day as reaction will pour into the ruling on New York's law. But as you know, Brett, we're still waiting for the ruling on Mississippi's abortion law. And we have seen pro-abortion groups threatening violence. Already there have been attacks against pro-life groups. We saw the takeover of the Wisconsin state capitol by pro-abortion activists. We know that this is an imminent ruling. It could come down tomorrow. Are you concerned when we have full-on threats being made, like groups like Jane's Revenge, and they're not apparently afraid of repercussions?
Yeah, and I think this is the consequence we suffer when you have a DOJ that has refused to enforce laws, allowing the parading and picketing in front of the judges' homes, when the DOJ has sent a clear message that they weren't going to take seriously, some of the prior riots over the last couple of years. And what do you have? You have emboldened individuals that want to capitalize and use this as a time to sow, more seeds of disruption and division in this country. I'm worried about it. I think it's a critical moment for Merrick Garland, for DOJ, and for every law enforcement agency in this country, that they be prepared and that they do everything they can and not let what happened over the last couple of years happen in these next few days.
Obviously, too, as I mentioned, this group, Jane's Revenge, saying they will have a night of rage. And we've already seen violence. That 26-year-old man accused of attempting to murder Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, as you probably know, just pleaded not guilty in federal court. He faces life in prison. I mean, obviously, he's got a defense attorney who's probably going this route and saying this is what he needs to do. But in light of what the DOJ has not done so far, do you think they would work out a deal with this 26-year-old man from California, give him a lighter sentence, or do you think they will put him away for life?
Well, I think there's a big difference between what the maximum penalty is versus what an individual may be convicted of and the actual sentence that they get. In the federal system, they use a structured matrix to determine the sentence based on his criminal history and based on the level of the crime. Now, if they prove, an attempted killing on a judge, that guideline range is going to be very, very high. There will be plea negotiations and discussions, but I think this is a critical case where the country watches and sees if they're going to take seriously and put politics aside against a man who was very clearly indicating that he wanted to kill Justice Kavanaugh.
And got very close to his home. Brett Tolman, always great to have you. We know you're checking back with us in about an hour or so we will get more reaction, I'm sure, coming in, and we'll be speaking with you very soon. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Bianca.